I'm Chance Dorland, and in San Antonio, military means local. This is Military City, a new podcast from expressnews.com. San Antonio Express News senior reporter Sig Christensen was embedded with the 3rd Infantry Division during the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003 and has reported on military-related topics for decades. On this podcast, Sig and I discuss the military stories important to San Antonio, both from today and from the past. And Sig, unlike some of our previous episodes, today we're focusing on a story that is ongoing and urgent. So tell me about the soldier you spoke with who soon may be without a country.
Well, Alina Kaluzhna is a 30-year-old soldier who really didn't even, think of herself as joining the Army at one point. She came to the United States to perfect her English, and she studied in an American school when she lived in Croatia, which is where her parents are today. And she came when she was 21. She really ended up liking the United States, likes the people, and she'll tell you what she likes about it as compared to what she didn't like about Croatia, which is more structured society, certainly more conservative, with expectations for what people should be doing by a certain age. That just isn't who she is. And in that way, she's an extremely American person. She has her own drummer that she's listening to, and she studied U.S. history and the U.S. Constitution as part of her studies at Quincy College in Massachusetts. So she's very steeped in what it is to be an American, and she has very American instincts. And so here she is in the Army and doing a good job from what everybody seems to think. And she's out at Camp Bullis, where she ends up helping medics in training. She herself was there one time learning to be a combat medic. And this is the second largest field in the Army. It's really an important field because when you're in a battle zone, the thing that you know is that if you get badly hurt, you're going to have a medic soon, and they're going to be able to do things like stop your bleeding. They often can save you, stabilize you, and get you to a combat support hospital where they can then go forward and ensure that you're stabilized and get moved to hospitals back in Europe and the States. It's a big job, and she's learned how to do it well. She was a very good student. She was a leader when she was in her advanced training at Fort Sam Houston, which is a long-time Army medic training hub. The medics have been training there for decades. So unfortunately, her security clearance review came back. It's a negative review. She's going to be forced out. She probably will end up having to leave the country.
And so we'll get to actually several clips, the first of which will deal specifically with what you just mentioned about her security clearance. But the woman we're talking about today, as you already mentioned, not your typical American in the military. You know, she's from a foreign country. She came to the country to learn English. Talk about the program that she was a part of, which I believe now has ended.
She came into the Army under the Military Accessions Vital to the National Interest Program. That's called MAVNI. And both the Army, Army Reserve, the Air Force, and the Navy were participants in that program. It was approved by Defense Secretary Robert Gates, and it had a lot of supporters because they were looking for language speakers. Not easy to find among the United States citizen population. In fact, pretty much impossible to find. You're not going to have an easy time finding people who speak Dari or Russian or any kind of language that you'd encounter in say, Africa, such as French or Swahili. And so they actually recruited people for those languages through this program. And for a number of years, from 2009 until 2016, everything was fine. And more than 10,000 people, non-citizens, were able to join the military, most of them the Army and the Army Reserve, through the MAVNI program. Some Pentagon security reviews revealed that there were potential problems with the program. Now, they're not talking about what problems they found, and that is a point of concern. They just basically tell you, trust us. But they haven't exactly said what the problems were. Ultimately, there was a memo sometime in 2017, probably the spring. We don't know because the memo is not dated. And it says that we found that this program is open to insider attacks. And we're pretty sure that there could be espionage cases. And simply stated, people in the MAVNI program have a higher probability of being security risks than U.S. citizens. Mind you, the Army has had problems with American citizens who were members of gangs for years and decades. So it's not exactly a new problem. And they try to screen those people out too, but I'm guessing that they're not always successful. In order to ensure that this population of non-citizens was better vetted, they came up with an extremely strict vetting program. And it involves doing a background check that ordinarily is reserved for people who get a top secret clearance. In a lot of these cases, in fact, all of the cases with the MAVNI kids, they're given jobs that don't have a requirement for a security clearance because non-citizens cannot get a clearance, period. So I can get a security clearance, but a Ukrainian kid or a kid from Afghanistan or Germany, those people, if they're born in those countries, cannot. And so she is in the combat medic field, which has no security clearance requirement at all. Nonetheless, they're required to meet the requirements of a top secret clearance. That's not easy to do. And it takes a lot of background checking to vet somebody. And what's happening right now is that a lot of these people are getting letters saying that they simply did not pass their security clearance checks. And as a result, they're getting pink slips. And that creates problems for the military and for the soldiers. The military loses language speakers, like a fellow at Texas A&M who is a PhD student from China. He actually speaks Mandarin. That guy was in the Army Reserve and has been told that he will be separated from the reserve. He will not get a chance to go to boot camp. And there were about half of the MAVNI students in the Army were in the Army Reserve delayed training program. So he's one of those people, and he's gone. He may end up going back to China if he cannot get an employer to sponsor him once he earns his PhD. And so this is what he says. His name is Panzu Zhao. And he says, basically, I'm a loyal Aggie. I'm a lawful student and a legal resident all these years. And Mr. Zhao is simply as frustrated as he can be because he feels like he did everything right. And he's still getting the short end of the stick. And that's exactly what's happening to Alina as well.
Yeah, it'd be one thing if they didn't allow new people to join the program and they carried on with the people who were kind of already, going through the process, starting the process, already in the military. But now to, question these people and, as you've already mentioned, take them out of the positions that they were either about to start taking or already in the military, that's a different question altogether. So let's get to our first clip. This is about her security clearance.
You've got this problem, the security clearance. You seem to have found a home, but you're at risk of being kicked out of it. What's going through your mind?
That's a little complicated question, obviously, because for the longest time I thought, the dream has come true. I got in, I went to basic training, I went to AAT, I did everything that I could, and everything was going fine until one day they tell you, we decided based on whatever information that they had, we decided that maybe it's better for the military not to have you in it, and that's a little disappointing, I guess, because I would understand if it's when you did something wrong and you did, and you need to face the consequences. But when it's something imaginary or something as simple as somebody's idea or somebody's understanding, somebody's opinion of you, that is putting you into that position, that's a little frustrating.
And in this case, this opinion of you is, in your view, wrong. It's an incorrect judgment that has been made, right?
Yes.
You come home after a day at work. What's going through your mind?
I still have hope that it will work out. Maybe because it has been so long that nothing is happening, that gives me hope that, it's still possible, that it will change, because things do change sometimes. And that is why I'm doing all that, talking to people and trying to get my side of the story out. So that way maybe somebody will hear and believe that I am not a person who should be feared or, not trusted to be in the military.
So, Sig, I'm guessing the reason why someone would join this program as a non-American citizen would be that, yes, maybe they have an affinity for the country that you and I were born into. They want to stay here. I'm guessing it also looks very good for them, if they want to become an American citizen. But Alina, like other people who are in a similar situation, they may now have to go back to a country they haven't been living in for some time. But for Alina specifically, that is not really an appropriate situation to place her in. And why is that?
Well, it's real simple. When Alina swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, when she went into the Army, she did something that basically undid her right to Ukrainian citizenship. Ukrainian law basically says that if you do that, if you join a foreign army and you swear allegiance to another country, that you lose your citizenship. So, two things here that are definitely problems for her. That's the first one. Maybe when she gets to the airport after she is forced to go home, nobody will notice. But then maybe they already will know. It's impossible for me to tell you. I don't think she knows either. And that's a huge uncertainty for her. Secondly, there's no way she's going back to Croatia other than for a visit. I mean, it's this simple. The Russians run it now. This was not part of Russia. It was part of the Ukraine. Nonetheless, the Russians own it now. They took it, which everybody should be reminded of. This was not something that people in Croatia wanted. It was something that was forced upon them. So she can't move home and stay with her parents. She isn't even a legal resident. Who knows what would happen to her if the Russians were to get word that she had served in the United States Army as a medic. There is simply no way to go home. She has no home. If she loses her shot at citizenship in the United States, Alina's going to be without a country.
And so let's hear all that in her own words.
This is one thing I'd want to ask. You said that your preference is that you don't go home, that you stay here in America. Tell me why going home is a bad option. The CBS story talked about you being branded a traitor if you go back. Why is going home a really bad option for you?
Well, it has to do with the law that says that if you join the foreign military, you automatically lose your Ukrainian citizenship. So that would technically not allow me to go home. I don't know if they know or not that I'm in the military, and I don't know what's going to happen once I arrive at the airport. And if they do know, then I don't know what's going to happen, if I can even enter the country. I do have the passport, but I don't know how much good that is once you're technically lose the citizenship of Ukraine.
This kind of is a grim scenario because you go back, you have no idea whether they'll arrest you or whether they'll not even know that who you were.
Yes, and my home is in Crimea. Where my parents are, where I grew up, that's in Crimea, and that's now part of Russia. So home is not even an option. For me to go home to my family, I have to live in Russia, which I'm not allowed to do right now because I don't have a Russian citizenship. I'm not, like, I can go visit for a few months, but I'm not legally allowed to stay there. So I would have to go back to the place that I don't know, and it's no longer feels like home because I haven't been there in 9 years. And I grew up here. I came here when I was 21. So all my adult life and all my growing up as a person happened here. And there's a lot of things that changed in Ukraine in the last 9 years. They had its big conflict, and the country was torn apart. So me going back to what you might call home is not that. It's just going to a country that I don't know anymore.
And then finally, Sig, we do have one more clip to get to from Alina and yourself, an interview that you recorded earlier on before we spoke today. I just want to kind of give you more of an opportunity to talk about her story and perhaps just this program in general. And you did mention before we just played the last clip that we heard that she does still have a chance for staying in America. What's that look like?
Well, maybe her best chance is people reading the story. Maybe her best chance is somebody on Capitol Hill reading the story, say a congressman or a senator, and saying, this is really a bad idea. It's a crapshoot. It's hard to know what her chances are. And as you will hear her say, she's not taking things very far. She lives day to day. She has no idea of what the future is, and the present is a pretty grim period for her, by the way. She's separated from her husband. She just moved to a new apartment. She has a bed. She has some IKEA shelving. She has a rickety dining table, and she's got a 4-month-old lab puppy. And that's about it. And after she comes home from work, she has a lot of time to think about it. And so she's really in a bad jam. You could call it the proverbial rock and a hard place. And she's not the only one. There were something like 1,455 active duty MAVNI candidates who waited to ship out the basic training last fall. And then the Army got approval to extend their contracts for another year in order to allow the security clearance investigations to continue. That was a reed of hope that Alina clung to, along with many others. However, only a few of those cases, a few hundred, I should say, have actually gone far enough so where they can go to boot camp. So only a few hundred of those people are on their way to becoming full-fledged soldiers. And the soldiers whose clearance investigations haven't ended, they're all on hold. They don't go to an operational unit. If they're in the reserve, they don't go to their reserve unit. They're basically stuck in limbo. And that's where she is. Maybe this thing all works out. If it does, it's probably defying the odds at the moment because Alina's paperwork is already in the pipeline. It's in the Pentagon, and it'll come down to Fort Sam Houston at some point. And there's no timeline for that. Nobody really knows when the paperwork will arrive here. And they'll say, we're separating you. Thanks for your service. And here's your DD-214, an honorable discharge. You know, if she served out her contract, you know, she would have her citizenship and she would be able to stay. It may end up being that once she is chaptered out, as they call it in the Army, and they say you need to be on a plane by this date or that and leave the country. Now, that's just where things stand. And you can make an argument that that's just how the ball bounces, or you can say that's really unfair. The one thing I can tell you is that it costs $31,200 per student to train and field a combat medic. That's a lot of money. It takes 16 weeks to train a combat medic. And there's more training that takes place before the medic is sent off to the war zone. So, you know, we put a lot of money into it, and we put a high priority on it because every soldier goes into battle confident that if they get badly hurt, there's going to be somebody there to save them. Not only is that a morale issue, but it also is important in terms of ensuring that the Army has soldiers who are able to fight after they recover. It's a serious, serious issue. And the bottom line here is that there aren't enough Americans, citizens, who are joining the Army and able to join the Army for that matter. Many of them simply do not meet the standards. So with something like 3 out of every 10 being able to join, there are a lot of Americans who simply either don't want to join or can't. And as a result, the Army, the Army Reserve, the Air Force, and the Navy use this program to find people who could really help them. And with the program gone, there may be other ways to sign up those folks, but you still have the same problem. And if you can't trust them, can you really use them? It's a mess because when you get down to it, they went to that program because everybody agreed there was a need for it. And now the program has been discontinued, and there's actually nothing on the drawing board to replace it. In the meantime, you still have the same problem that you always did if you're an Army recruiter, meeting your goal of signing up 2 recruits a month. That doesn't sound like much, but it's very, very difficult for recruiters to do in the Army. They typically need 67,000 active duty soldiers a year, and then they need another 13 or 14,000 soldiers in the reserve and the Guard. And the reserve has historically not met its goals. So, you know, what you've got here is a very difficult job every day. And recruiters across the country, by the way, have a difficult job every day. The Air Force doesn't have anywhere near as many recruiters as the Army does, and they still have to come up with about 30,000 airmen this year. The Navy is a large force, and I don't know what their quotas are, but they will need something in the same area as the Air Force probably. It's a lot of people. And historically, in the entire time I've been here as a military writer, 21 years, they have all struggled to some degree at some point. The Army has struggled the most.
And in the meantime, you wait, as is the case with the soldier, the woman we're talking about today. And let's hear that in her own voice. That's going to do it for today's episode of Military City. Always great to speak with you, Sig, and we'll be back in a week or two with another episode.
You've got a lot going on in your head being
Yeah.
here alone. What is that like for you? How are you holding up being here at night alone with all this on your shoulders?
It's hard. Well, that's right. I got the puppy to keep me company. It's been hard to keep going back to work and try to put that behind you and put that in the back of your mind so it doesn't affect your work. And then you come home and you kind of play over the day and what people said and what happened and stuff like that. Kind of trying to come to some sort of positive mindset where you can go on just waiting and hoping that it will work out.